I have so much respect for you as a man, and I love something. My favourite thing in life, two favourite things outside of all the people I love, is when I find somebody who is uniquely them.
Yeah.
Like if you put them in their world, they're brilliant.
Yeah.
But they've got this unique personality and unique perspective, and I love that about you. The other thing is I love somebody who is so dialed in on what they want to do. Like I think watching somebody in their flow and in self-actualization, as you talk about, is a fucking magnificent thing to watch. I love that.
Well, I appreciate you get to... This is the danger of meeting me in person. Much more disappointing in person. But no, it's definitely been a journey, and it still is a journey. So, I mean, the one thing I've finally realised, like literally in the last year, is just that the uniqueness part. It's been like a whole psychological battle trying to fit in. Biggest issue of my life has never really been having one person I can look to as someone who's been someone like me in my shoes before. And all the unique circumstances of the last 4 years, I felt like so much of it undid so much of the confidence and flow I had from my time in the military. But what it actually did was break me down personally and build me back up. And you say like in your element, like the whole thing is I just don't know what my element is. But the whole mindset piece that's been the turning the corner for me has just been appreciating like we literally are all individual unique pieces of art. And like I don't get art, like the art I like is just abstract random dots and shit that I can turn on different angles depending upon how I'm feeling that day. And just thinking of yourself that way, and instead of the whole trying to fit in, just appreciate how unique you are and just appreciate like why you're doing what you're doing. I think that's been the biggest thing for me. But yeah, mate, it's just a journey of self-discovery. And I don't know. I won't go into this saying like I don't have answers. I just have like my own experiences, and I think it's so important for people to understand how like different everyone is, even from your conversation about how your body was performing running 10Ks a day and hardwired, and me the same. I think the biggest issue that held me back for so long was listening to other people's stories and thinking like that's the way I should be, or that's, you know, the way things are, as opposed to re-embracing this childlike curiosity of like we are all so unique in every inch and layer that makes us up, and discovering that is like a lifelong journey.
Do you think that you have to leave yourself in order to come back to yourself and realise that you were enough in the first place? And maybe all the things that you question about your personality and who you are, and all the things that you feel that maybe it doesn't fit the mould of what you're trying to do, or the kind of professional achievements you're trying to have, isn't actually important?
Well, I think shame, stigmas and constructs, from the way we're brought up through to whatever religion we're exposed to as a kid, through to what, you know, Western society or whatever society we brought up in teaches us. This is why so much of sort of the work I do on myself and public speaking and whatever, coaching, it comes down to like values, you know, fundamental to everything, fundamental to every philosophy is like a set of values, and deciding upon what your values are help you sort of identify how you do what you do, appreciating that what you do or what you choose to do is just such an open drawer for you to pick from. And instead of going into things with like premeditated constructs or shames or stigmas, having much more of an open-mindedness to it. Like particularly I find here in Australia, I just find it so dangerous how isolated and ignorant we are, just being so far away from everyone and everything else. And it's only through like traveling to other countries, other cultures, and even just sitting in there for a moment and looking at what someone does, and perhaps asking why they do that, even though it doesn't conform to the most effective or efficient way I know it can be done. But actually appreciating there's a whole backstory that's led that person to deciding to do that thing that way. You know, it's getting back to like what we were as kids, this childlike curiosity. You know, everything from relationships through to, you know, how we interact and engage with others. I just find it so fascinating. I've been through this whole like process of unlearning all the institutionalized constructs and learnings I had, going from school straight to 16 years in the military, straight to the gay community, straight to trying to figure out my identity at the end of all of that. And it's only been like removing ego. Like I've got so much left to learn. There are so many different people who are so many different masters in their own universe. There is no one correct solution to life, but there's an incredible journey along the way, and it's just how much your capacity is to be able to take on those different perspectives of others. Because at the same time, it can become too much. And at one point, you have to decide sort of who you are and what your track is in it. Otherwise, it's too easy to be pulled in different ways and influenced by others. But for me, it just comes back to like, what are your core sets of values? Like, what do you truly believe in? Like, how you treat yourself and how you treat others, and like, what is your overall purpose in life? You know, for me, it's literally just trying to make the world a better place. So one day I can feel like, you know, on my deathbed, I did what actions I could in my own bubble to make the world better for the next Heston Russell.
What made me giggle just then, because I love so much of what you said. And by the way, I decided we started this 3
Good.
months ago, because that was so
Good,
nicely
right.
put. So we're on a roll.
Okay.
But what made me giggle is I was just thinking, you know, even as a younger man, like early 20s, I'm still a young man, right? I'm 28.
Mate, people are getting younger and younger these days.
They are. Mate,
Yeah.
you look younger than me.
Mate, no, but like, this is like when I was 20 years old, mate, I was in East Timor with
Yeah.
my platoon of 30 guys doing my first deployment. Like, these days, just people are staying younger, older, like as far as even the requirements of society on us.
I agree.
Mate, I definitely have, I've definitely aged the last few years, but I definitely feel like I'm coming into like a new era of looking younger and healthier, as people say. But like we said before, it's because like what's going on inside is finally realigned again.
Well, it's funny because as a younger man in my early 20s, even when I started this 5 years ago,
Yeah.
I thought I knew so much about the world.
Oh, yep.
And at 28, I sit and I have to laugh. Like the image that popped in my head as you were talking there, and I was picking up on what you were putting down, was, you know, that scene from The In-Betweeners when Jay is in the car in the passenger seat and he yells out, "Bus wankers!"
Oh,
and then
I can't
next
remember.
minute the traffic stops,
Yeah.
and then they're all coming over and being, it's like
do now.
that is the
I do now.
depiction of
Yeah.
being so on your high horse as a young person that,
Yeah.
hey, I've got this figured out and I can see the world pretty clearly through my young eyes.
Yep.
And then a minute later, you're stuck in traffic, you've been bombarded by life, and you go, hey, I don't really know anything but the way that I interpret it.
Yeah.
And I love, there was something that you said in a pod that I listened to. It might have been one of the military focused ones. I can't remember the name. Zero Limits, which was fucking fantastic, by the way.
They're good dudes. He's
Where
a good dude. Good
I
crowd.
listened to you talk about that, you know, everyone's come to Jesus moment, that self-actualization where you go, hey, I'm figuring out how this works for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the key lesson of getting older.
100%. I think it's important to note that you do know, only you knows everything about yourself. Like, so often, I mean, that's a terrible way to put it. You do know a lot. You know a lot about your own experience. And the key part that I've often found is too often we think that other people know our experience because we just take it for granted because it's deep inside our head. Like the amount of conversations I have with people who all of a sudden discover something new about me that I thought was just sort of common knowledge as well. So I definitely think you need to like take stock in and be confident in like what you have done in your own life. But again, just have that mindset of there's so much left to learn. There's so many different ways. For example, in the military, mate, you know, in Afghanistan, we've got to go into this target to, you know, capture or kill this bad insurgent leader. There are probably 100 different ways, if not more, to achieve that mission. How we do that then comes down to tactics. And, you know, there's a professional military art and science where we learn about tactics. And my job as the commander is to then go through a deliberate process to, you know, test, assess and decide the best tactics to be employed. It's the same as your life. Like there's definitely a science, a scripture to the way in which, you know, particularly society requires you to do it, you know, lawfully and legally. But then there's just the art. There literally is the way in which you choose to start taking one step after the other in that. And that's the incredible creative process. And I think it's just reaching that point to realize that you are literally the one holding the palette with your own brush and are able to do that. And just to figure out a process through which you intend to do that. And again, I come back to that childlike curiosity, but I find so often in society or personally where we start to compare and contrast and compete with each other, it's when we start to think we know the one best way to get to there without appreciating that there are actually so many different ways to do that and being willing to like learn from others in that. But at the end of the day, you're the one who makes the decision of how you decide to do that, if that makes sense.
Mate, it makes perfect sense. There's so much I want to talk to you about today.
Just put down tactics and strategy. Like life is tactics and strategy, not to compete against each other, but just appreciating there's so many different routes, sliding doors, all the rest. And it's just having a formula or a process through which you decide to, you know, take that first step.
Let me ask, tactics, strategy.
Yeah.
What do you think comes more naturally to you?
Well, so words are so important in a military context. For example, the difference between tactics means tactical on the ground. operationally means like within the operational theatre, and strategic means like it affects an international level. Like that's literally the crescendoing layers and levels. Whereas in regular society, like strategy is different to tactics and all this. So tactics is for me like in the weeds, how you actually do things. Strategy is kind of like the larger plan. I think the tactics is more important because the strategy, I mean, you have to have an eye on both, but like the amount of times you kind of think that you can continue to influence the strategy, and that's where I find it's very easy for you to, you know, sort of build yourself into a corner and get frustrated when things don't go your way. Like the whole mindset now is like, I know where I want to go, but every single day something new can continually pop up and come along, and being open to that. I find people really struggle when they just get fixated on, this is my strategy, this is my plan, I'm going to be married by this stage, I'm going to have this job, I'm going to do that. Like you're setting yourself up for failure, and you're setting yourself up not to enjoy the different tactical options that come along.
Which is really interesting because you mentioned before relearning everything that you did through institutionalized setups.
Yep.
That is kind of the mentality coming out of school, isn't it? Like we laugh about it all the time as a society that, you know, you're 16 at school. I was going to say 18, but I wasn't 18. I wasn't still at school when I was 18. So I'd left school. But like you're a young person at school and you're starting to look forward to your future and you're going, man, I'll probably have a couple kids by the time I'm 25. You know, I'll be married by 22 with the girl of my dreams.
Yeah.
And I'll be in a great career by then and I'm making good money. And I guess I'll just have to decide what car I drive that morning. Is it the Bentley SUV? Is it the Ferrari with the roof down? You have this idea for your life that is the strategy you have forecast. Yeah. And then life happens.
Yep.
And you can either be disappointed by what's happening to you, or you can say that, hey, life is happening for me, and the on-ground tactics are, okay, I'm going to be high agency here.
Yeah.
And I was literally reading this article this morning by George Mack, great thought leader, and he was talking about this concept of being a high agency person. And I had a very real example of it yesterday, which is so comical, but I'll share it with you. So I'm getting married in August.
Jeez, get it.
Yeah, so exciting.
Yeah.
And listeners have heard me talk about this enough, but Soph, my fiance, she calls me at work and she's stressed. She's like, darling, is there a package at home? I'm like, hey, been sitting near the front door on a work meeting. There's no package. And she's like, I got a notification to say that at 11:16, one of my like after wedding, like after ceremony dresses got delivered.
Yeah, right.
And if it's not there, like, oh my God, I don't know where it's gone. They're saying it's there. I've called them and the driver was at that location. They can see it on his GPS. They can't tell which house, but he was there and he's saying that, oh, Sophie signed for it. And I'm like, well, he's full of shit to start with. But I'm like, leave it with me, darling. Walk outside, sunny's on, go knock on the neighbours' doors, thinking that I'm ready for a showdown, right?
You got my missus
But
dress.
it's literally, it's just literally lying at my neighbour's front door. They're not even home. And I'm like, beauty.
Yeah.
So I grab it and I go back in. Don't worry, darling, it's sorted.
Yeah.
I felt so fucking high agency, which is so ridiculous. But that concept explained in George's article is the difference between a high agency and a low agency person is a low agency person believes life is happening to them. Yeah. A high agency person believes that life is happening for them. Ooh. And I really like this concept because as I was reading the article, I was thinking about our chat here today. Yeah. And you strike me particularly as a very high agency person who, and you are so fucking humble. Oh. So just hold your horses before you start to tell me why you're not high agency. But you certainly have had this ability that no matter what happened to you and to be in the situation that you were in as a commando over in Afghanistan and in Iraq over the course of your 5 deployments, it takes a high agency person to lead a team like that. Yeah. And I listened to you on Zero Limits, which is actually a recommendation from my brother-in-law who loved that episode and said to me, you got to listen to this if you got Heston coming on. And mate, when you spoke about losing Scott, your mate, and the situation that played out in the hours after that, to me, it just went high agency.
I don't know. I enjoy constructs to help you sort of identify and navigate life, for sure. I definitely have felt high agency, as you put it, and I've definitely felt extremely low agency. There's been times where I have definitely felt that I am making the world happen around me. And there's definitely times where I have been fed a big spoonful of the world, putting me back in my place. Yeah, particularly during my time in Special Forces, in combat, the most amazing state of flow or high agency I've ever felt. I just supremely felt that, there were times where I literally thought something was going to happen around the corner of this building, and it sort of happened. But so much of that also comes down to like the time, training, preparation. We'd plan weeks or months in advance of missions, and the sort of level of training and tactics and just intuition you have. I sort of say, me and my guys were operating on like this extra sensory sort of perception level of connectivity. It was just incredible. Through to like the last 4 years, mate, what people haven't seen behind the scenes is like I nearly bankrupted myself raising a political party and running for the Senate. I had to move back into my mum's place as like a 35-year-old man, and how all of a sudden I went through a 3-month period of extreme depression, being like, I've achieved all this in my life, to now lead me to not being able to afford rent and living in my mum's sort of bedroom, through to taking on the ABC, winning, then being torn back down again through nothing happening, them adding gunshots, and the whole of, the political and media elite not seeming to care that people are held to be to go in there and add gunshots to veterans in combat and call us war criminals. And all these values and beliefs that literally were the fundamental of the reason why I chose to and enjoyed my military service so much, to just have it thrown away under the bus and no one from the military even being there to say, this is wrong after 16 years worth of service. It's been so hard not to sit there and be like, woe is me, I hate the world, it's time to get my pound of flesh from everyone else. Instead of being like, the world happens, I can't control all of the world, but I can then control what I learn from that and apply that into each and every single day. So I think it's a bit of a balance of both. Like, in order to be high agency, you just have to constantly be sitting there and assessing what's going on in the world and also feeling it, and doing so through an open and curious mind to then be able to immediately take those lessons and apply them and just continually to advance every single day. And that's how I think you turn low agency into high agency, essentially. I think it's not to be in a place where you just think, I'm a high agency individual, therefore I do this. Like, it takes work, but so much of the work is moving past your ego, moving past what you expect or think from the world, embracing whatever comes, and having this mindset of like, cool, so what now? What can I learn from that? What can I apply? What can I put into practice? And that's what I think is my true skill set. I'm a very fast learner, and I'm finally in a place where I've been forced to be vulnerable, exposed, embarrassed, all the things I never was in my military service. And, through trauma, through pressure, we literally evolve, emotionally. It's not the old, diamonds are formed under pressure, like, strongest metals and rare earths are formed under pressure, and that's how we respond to that pressure. That's what I think is that sort of secret to becoming higher level. Just like that situation with you and your missus' dress, even to be going out there and be ready to accept confrontation is like a bridge too far for others. But perhaps you're quite like myself, where I draw courage from purpose supporting others. If that was me going out there for my shirt, I'd probably leave it. But if it's a shirt for a friend or my missus, I have all the courage and armor in the world I need to go out there and sort of face those things. And it's also learning that about yourself and being able to draw motivation from those elements when you need them.
I will say, for people listening, I certainly wasn't trying to sound like a hero. You just talked about frontline war combat, and me going after my missus' second dress for a wedding night is certainly a different kettle of fish. But I'll hit the metaphorical ball back.
Comparison is a theft of happiness. All right, relax.
This is true.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. One of the other things in this article was he said, which I think is a great extension to what you were saying, that people often can confuse this idea with it. Maybe high agency is I'm the cup half full kind of person. Maybe low agency is cup half empty. He's like, actually, it's neither. To be a pessimist is cup half empty. To be an optimist is cup half full.
Yeah.
To be high agency is to recognize that you're the tap that fills them.
Oh, I love that.
And I think that, one of the things that I do
is that
want
narcissistic
to preface, maybe. But
Yeah.
aren't all these traits narcissistic on social media these days anyways?
I don't know. But my favorite one with that analogy is it's both. Yeah. And it's okay for the cup for one day to be half empty and for the cup to be full. I think it's the realist who appreciates it's both. we're so beholden to get into this one polar. It's either this way or it's this way. Like one of my bosses once said that I have the most destructive mindset in the most constructive way. It's just refusing to accept things for the way they are or whatever. And again, I think it's just that curious mind. It's great to jump into templates to help you navigate whatever you need to in your life. But just, I find the danger is when people like just constantly keep applying templates to themselves. I mean, I see an amazing psychologist, and I went through like a tough patch last year when I went through a breakup. And she's like, Heston, if I had Mr. Miyagi, that would have been great. And she's like, Heston, like, I get the whole self-help, self-development. I was reading about, attachment types and all this. She's like, just be careful. It's so easy to like put yourself into a box. It's great to use these tools to put in your kit bag to navigate. But yeah, it's just, you got to just take it all on as perspective, eh? Sorry, I jumped into your I am the tap.
No, don't worry. I was just thinking we could send this footage over to the ABC and they could probably edit that to make it look like you caught the fly.
Careful, mate. All I've learned is there are people out there who are just malicious, conniving people who weren't hugged enough or whatever as a kid. And like even you saying that, they'll want to come after you. Like it's just, and bring it on. Like society's had enough of these people. Bullies.
Mate, 100%. I want to ask you something. So I was thinking about this chat here today, and I want to give some kudos to a bunch of people who have interviewed you already because in particular, I listened to the Zero Limits pod. I also listened to Sam Hope and his conversation, World Class Conversations. World Class Voices, sorry. And I'll say that, so I know Sam mutually through a mate, Chris.
Okay.
And had never met Sam properly, had actually said g'day to him on FaceTime for 2 seconds once when I was with Chris. Seen that chat pop up as I was searching through looking for you. Yeah. And I listened to that conversation and that motherfucker stole a lot of the ideas and questions that I had for this. Like he done such a great job of the interview. I was like, you bastard, now I've got to take this in some different directions. That's right. But that's one of the things that I love about this podcast and conversations is today what I don't want to do is just explore a bunch of stuff you've already talked about. Of course, we'll lean into some of those conversations that are important. But I thought it'd be fun to try and take this in directions that are a little bit different. So we get to have a stimulating conversation. But maybe the people who love what you're about, there are plenty of them, can hear another side of you.
Plenty of haters too.
Yeah. Oh, mate, don't we all? One of the things I was thinking about is sacrifice is a word that's thrown out a lot through military conversation and in those circles. Yep. And I think you've heard everyone that operates at the high level that you did in Special Forces. I've got a couple of friends who have been in that world and you hear the conversation around I was willing to sacrifice my life for my country. Yeah. That's certainly the highest order of sacrifice, but there is probably a whole element to sacrifice that maybe is flying under the radar, and it's the things that you sacrifice about yourself personally in order to serve country at the highest.
This guy's good. I really enjoyed that thread that you just did then.
Well, I just think it's
on the money. You actually stirred up some emotions there. That was really good.
Well, I'm glad because I would love to talk about this if you're willing to.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I think about is I often listen to people like yourself, and I must say I'm not pissing in your pocket here, but I really have enjoyed listening to everything that you've been a part of. It fascinates me, people from your world, probably because I never had the courage to do something like that.
I'm going to stop it there. The amount of people I meet who's like put it on a pedestal, like I never did what you did, yada, yada, yada. Like everyone in the world can't go and join the Special Forces. Like too often I have seen young men, particularly in the military, who never got into Special Forces, who never tried out for Special Forces, who had medical conditions and never joined the army, constantly carry this potential chip of inferiority complex on their shoulder. And it's like more people have gone on to greater things that have never served in the military, and great people who have served in the military have gone on to great things. The whole piece is, identifying and putting parameters around like what is success for you and not in a comparative place. Draw inspiration from each other, and it's great to hear like that you're willing to be humble enough to draw inspiration from others, but just don't do it in a place of like comparison. Like we all have these parallel lives to live, and if we all so many people, particularly like young straight men, see my military career as like the ultimate in masculinity and self-achievement and all the rest. Like it was a different time, it was a different place, and there's so many lessons I'm happy to help pass on. But you've been through so many different things in your life that would be scary to me, like getting married, mate. Honestly, that amount of responsibility and deciding on one person like scares the shit out of me.
Until you find the right person. I'll say that.
I'm with you. But like, even being vulnerable enough to open yourself up to like connect with and be available to like one person, that's like a whole different kettle of fish. So
we can have a chat about that.
I would just remove that. Don't put it on a pedestal. Just treat it as equals 100%.
Well, you're very kind. You're very kind. And I think and feel for you, because I can imagine how much of yourself you would have sacrificed through this as a person, your feelings, emotions, your life. And there's a couple things that I want to touch on here. This is a fucking long question.
Good.
But there's a couple things I want to tap on, and we can come back to them all so we can address them properly. I am fascinated with, and I'll tell you some stuff off camera later today that I can't disclose publicly yet, but this idea around, I had a viral moment online a couple of years ago. It's not hard these days, but I had a viral moment online for something that meant a lot to me, where as an exercise with two of my best mates, we wrote our own eulogies as an opportunity to reflect on life as we knew it, to think about mortality and the finality of life, and the blessing that means that we get to exist and experience life as it is. But in knowing that this is final, what do you want to live for? And I'm a very emotional cat. Like if you get emotional today, I'll have a cry.
You're starting to stir some emotions here. It's very interesting.
And I was thinking about, on the train up today, I have a 2-hour train ride to the studio here whenever I come.
Get it. You're right.
And I sat and I was looking out the window and I was thinking about this today, and I just thought, there's so many parts to this question, but I just thought, you spoke about death notes and funeral notes that everyone in your platoon had to write when going off to serve. And you had to read those. And you also had to write one for yourself. Can you remember some of the words that you will have written, some of the feelings you will have expressed in these notes?
Oh, goodness. I put so much stock in how important that process was to then be able to be so self-actualized and in my flow in combat in Afghanistan.
I'm going to get emotional here.
No, it was just the true acceptance of, like, there's this incredible mindset that comes from knowing you've put in the work, knowing you have literally pushed yourself to the absolute limits, knowing this deployment was coming up, and also just all of the experience I had throughout my entire career. I trained with my guys for 18 months, and put in the work. We all knew what our purpose was, and it made it so much easier for me to, if need be, make the difficult decision. You just had this foundation of mutual respect. And then sitting there, and I wrote a letter. I remember I had 3 really good mates from the previous army unit I was from up in Townsville. They were kind of like my little brothers. And then, to my family members. So I wrote a bunch of different letters. And I just known at that point in time that I'd been to quite a number of funerals, including for a couple of guys that we just never thought would be the people who get killed. These are people who were like killed in combat overseas. And you too often were there, at the wake or whatever, like just having good conversations about how much of a good person that guy was. And that's where I remember writing that letter, is like, too often I've now appreciated that the words we want to say are never spoken, and the opportunity to like say how much I value you as a person, and pretty much go into like a bromance of how much I really respected that person, telling them what I respected and really admired about them. And same for the family, I remember writing to my mother and saying, because in the military we have this saying of like, you've got your family and then you've got your family by choice. And it's so much easier for your family by choice being those you choose to serve within the military, and those who you choose to be your friends in the military can feel so much closer than family, because we're all born into our family. We don't get to choose it. And you can imagine like-minded going there and achieving amazing things in the world brings this, mateship and strength of relationship that's really hard to appreciate anywhere else. But I remember reminding to my mum and sincerely meaning it, like, if I got to choose my mum, I'd still choose you, just because of the person you've become and the lessons we've shared along the way. And we never used to get along at all during my teenage years or things like that. But, and even today, like seeing the woman she's grown into, she just had like a double knee reconstruction last year and has this new lease on life. Just taking the time to sit there and reflect and truly identify what it is you love and admire in someone and tell them. And then just to accept, again, as I said before, that you've put in the work. There are no loose ends. You've said the conversations to people that you wanted to say. There's nothing left that's felt unfinished, and just the ability to then truly be in that moment and have the conversation with yourself. I remember, I think I might have said it on the Sam's one, as I sat there with my platoon sergeant reading all the other guys' eulogies and all that, he turned to me and says, hey, statistics show that at least 1 or 2 of our guys will be killed or injured on this trip, just from previous deployments, And I knew the first, middle and last name of all my guys. I knew, their wives, their girlfriends, at least by name. I knew so much about them. And to think that one of them was going to die, it's so surreal, or me. But you just get to that place of, we've put in the work. We're that tight knit. There's no unfinished business. And if I die, then someone's been better than me. And I remember writing in one of those letters, if I die, know that I've died doing what I truly love with the people that I truly love by choice. And I just hope that if I've died, it hasn't been because I've failed to do my job properly and I haven't endangered anyone else through my actions that have led to my death. I remember that was one of the key sentences that I wrote at the end. And I truly believe that. And I truly went into that whole deployment with this mindset that one, I just never knew I was going to die. I never thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to be fine. I just had this mindset that everything was going to be okay. To a point where people thought I was a bit reckless with my own life sometimes, but I just had this eternal comfort that everything was going to be okay. And through to the point where if I do die, one, I hope it's quick because I don't really feel like going through a lot of pain. But 2, it's all for the right reasons. And I know it won't be in vain. And I know that if I do die, it will provide further inspiration and motivation for those around me, just like if they died, it would and has done the same for me. And it's fascinating because it's really led me to then look into other cultures. In particular, I love looking into the samurai culture, a culture, to the point of people are willing to take their own lives if they dishonor themselves. Honor was just such a huge thing. Your actions and what you say are the only things that can and should define you at the end of the day. And just to truly appreciate where those sort of extreme, potentially radical mindsets can come from a place of just extreme self-acceptance, but also having put in the work to become a professional master in what you choose to do. It's pretty incredible. And I'm sure as you could probably appreciate, then feeling the comfort to embrace and even talk about that extreme level of mindset and performance in a culture that we find here in Australia. I just find it's such a very uncomfortable and foreign conversation for a predominant culture here that is tall poppy cutting and pessimistic and all the rest. And I'm not glorifying death. I'm glorifying the incredible level of performance that can come from just doing practices like writing a eulogy and all the rest to achieve this mindset that is the highest vibration I've ever been at. And for all the right reasons. It's pretty fascinating. I mean, I don't know if I want to go into this, but you remember the Lint Cafe siege?
Yeah.
I was the adjutant at 2 Commando, which means you're also part of the tactical assault group. So when that happened, we had the unit spin up, ready to deploy, and there's a whole bunch of policy changes that came from that. But I remember speaking to people who were involved in the inquiry afterwards, and I remember part of it was the police officers who ultimately had to go in when the guy started shooting. Beforehand, a bit of their preparation was they still had their mobile phones and they were sending messages to their family saying this could be it and all the rest. And having gone through that experience myself, if you're doing that just before going in, it's already affecting your mindset. The ability to sanitize your head and heart to be on mission and having that closure already achieved needs more than a moment or 5 minutes or even 5 hours. It needs a lot of time and detail to process. And I literally was having a chat with some of the New South Wales Tactical Police yesterday and just said this to them, I take my hat off to them for what they do, because me and my job with my team in Afghanistan and Iraq is so much easier from a situational perspective. You're taken away from your lives, from your families, from your everyday society. You're placed into a base and isolated from social media and phones, and you go out there and do your jobs and come back to the same team, the same resources, the same situation, whereas they have to potentially face cameras, go home, deal with wives, deal with children, all the rest. And the fracture points from a mental health perspective, but also blurred lines that impact on that elite level of performance are so much more there and visible for them than they were for us. Like, I had the perfect platform to be able to go away, and do my missions in another country as opposed to being back here at home. But I think there's still the same tactics that you can employ to help achieve that sort of mindset that helps you be ready and willing to face death, which is kind of like the ultimate when it comes to sacrifice.
I can't remember his name, so apologies if he somewhat listens to this, but the gentleman who wrote Tiger Tiger.
Oh, yep.
I heard him speak about that moment, sending his missus a message, hey, can I see some photos of the kids?
Yeah.
And you hear that and you go, like, my old man was a copper, so was my pop.
All right.
So a lot of respect for the force. And my dad's been out of the force for probably 12, 13 years now. Because I was 16 when he left. And I remember being 13. My parents got separated just before that, probably when I was 11 or 12. And I remember knowing Dad was a copper. I was always very proud that my dad was a police officer. I really respected it. And for a long time, that's what I wanted to be. And as a young man. And I remember being 13, 12, around that age, always been very, very tight-knit with my family, like clingy to my family.
Nice.
I just appreciate and love them so much. I remember lying in bed at my mum's house one night, and I'm not kidding, Heston, like every day from the moment my parents separated till this day now, I speak to both of them every day on the phone, multiple times, like 2-3 times a day.
That's very cool.
Now, every night I'd have a ritual that when I was at mum's house, I would call Dad and have a chat. And we used to do a week on, week off. But this one particular night, I couldn't catch him. And I remember as a young man who loved his family so much, lying in bed and feeling very uncomfortable about the fact that knowing my dad is the kind of person who runs into danger.
Yeah.
I've watched him do it in front of us a million times to try and help people.
Yep.
And having this unsettling feeling that if my dad runs into nature tonight and I haven't talked to him and told him I love him, how would I feel about that?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was not a particularly religious person. I went to a Christian school, so I was surrounded by faith.
Yeah.
But the only thing I knew to do was to pray and put something out into the universe to keep my dad safe, healthy, happy and protected at all times.
Love that.
Literally from that night at 13, I cannot go to sleep at night as a 28-year-old man every night ever since without saying a prayer that includes every person's name that I love. It is wild. It takes me 5 minutes before bed.
I'm exactly the same. Like, please keep these people happy, healthy, and free from any accident, incident, or injury. That's my prayer every night.
I name all the dogs.
Oh, mate, got to.
You got to, right?
My dog Copper has his own 30-second little prayer, mate. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
It is it is a thing where I think constantly, probably because of my life experience, and I can imagine you're the same, about how final and uncertain life is. And I just, even just the other day, I got a text message from a old client of mine, well, not clients, but people I was helping to try and buy a property. Beautiful family. And they told me about the story of their son who, 12 years old, has been through years of a battle against cancer. He was in remission, so happy. He's got this beautiful spirit. Yeah. And I'd messaged them at the beginning of this year just to check in. Yeah. And she said, hey, Brad, I'm sorry to tell you, but our young man, I won't name him just in case, but he's gone back into cancer treatment. Yeah. And I'm a bit devastated for him, but, I said he's such a strong young man. He's been through so much. Send him a love and my best wishes to you guys. Please keep me in the loop. Yeah. And I just had a feeling on Monday. I was sitting at home and I thought, God, I haven't heard from him for 2 months. Yeah. And I messaged to hear that he'd passed 14 days ago. And, it's interesting, the psychology of a human being, because we know that the one thing that we all share as an end destination is death. Mm-hmm. But we walk through life often with this naivety that those things and those tragedies don't happen to us or the people that we love. Yeah. They happen to other people. Yep. So I can feel the empathy and I can be sad about the fact that someone else has lost their life, but that won't happen to me or my people. Yeah. And even hearing you before talk about writing your letters to the people you love, going through that process of your funeral note, but having this mentality that it won't be you.
Well, I think I had both mentalities. it's just this extreme comfort that if it does happen, then it's meant to be, and to not be afraid of it. And then there's this supreme comfort in me and my actions and my capabilities, I think, and just knowing, yeah, you're right. I don't know. I don't think I operated with this mindset like it's not going to happen to me. I just operated with this mindset of absolute acceptance, either way. And
which is beautiful and it's right.
oh, mate, it is the most, like, mental health 101 is the ability to be living and present in the moment. And this is my constant, like, mental health struggle. My head is just so good at planning and strategy and contingency planning and assessing all the different tactical routes in any potential strategy, or even just reflecting on what has been when you feel a little bit empty. But there is nothing like combat to bring you into the moment, and then to be physically tested. And then for me as the commander, to be constantly having to assess the tactics and what's happening and where are the assets. And like, it is so beautiful, and it sounds so weird, and I'm cautious saying it like that, but it is the most beautiful and authentic thing you can ever do in life, to be pitting your will against someone else. They're trying to kill you. If need be, you're trying to kill or capture them. Like, you're out there to achieve a mission. It's actually not about killing or capturing a person, unless they are the mission itself. But, you know, there's no stop button. There's no hiding behind a keyboard.
Pause, restart.
There's no respawning. You know, it's so authentic, and you literally get to see the true character of those around you come out. You know, I've seen people literally fighting for their lives in like the most inspiring way, because their mate is about to get killed if they don't do something. Like, it's just, you talk about this service and sacrifice part. We might all sign up to like be willing to sacrifice our life for our country, but at the end of the day, it's like for the person that's there next to you.
Mate, I love that. That's nice.
Oh, and it really is. And I mean, again, my good old psychologist, Romy, she's amazing. She doesn't let me get away with anything. So much of my struggling and adapting to everyday life has been coming from that supremely amazing existence where you just knew that people had your back to the point of death if need be, and you had theirs, to a point where, you know, there is no life or death, but people won't have you back anywhere near that. And you can imagine the stuff I've been through, you know, where all it could have taken is one person from defence to speak out and say, he wasn't even in Afghanistan when you guys said all this happened. After I sort of wrote to them, it's just this extreme level of abandonment, or just the current values of society where you have to represent yourself before others, where it's dog eat dog, where it's selfishness over selflessness.
Always on trial.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something? You're speaking about that present moment in combat so beautifully, in a way that most of us will never truly be able to understand. Right?
And I hope, and that's part of it. But it's a blessing and a curse. Once you appreciate how beautiful and perfect and clear the world can be, when the risk is the absolute highest, you sort of achieve this level of self-actualization and elite performance that is the constant high watermark. And it's so easy to compare everything else to it. You know, you don't need to worry about motivation or inspiration or, you know, any of the other trivialities of everyday life when you're just there in that moment, in that flow.
Was it Chandler and Friends that said, how do you recognise you're in the good old days when you're actually in the good old days? Like, can I ask you, is it hindsight that is allowing you to access how that truly felt? Or was it, I know you speak about being present in the moment of combat, but were you actually able to take that away from it? Like when you go back to base or camp, or this is really demonstrating how much of a fucking civilian I am.
No. These are great questions, mate.
When you go back,
I've been asked these questions before. Yeah.
Is it in that moment you go, that was presence personified?
One of my bosses used to say in the Special Forces, we have this terrible habit of standardizing excellence.
That's good.
To answer your question, it's only through hindsight that I've appreciated this. When you're in the moment, like, I don't know what people think. It's not like a footy team where you're high-fiving like, yeah, that was incredible. I particularly had the incredible opportunity of having all of my soldiers were more experienced than me. Nearly all deployed to Afghanistan or Iraq or been in combat so many more times than I had ever been. And I was only truly able to gauge like the level of intensity, I guess, from the combat we faced, from then coming back to base going, I've been here 5 or 6 times. Like, that was incredible. And even to this day, like the boys going, I'd been in Afghanistan multiple times, but that deployment was the standout. Just what we faced over there was incredible, and the way we worked together in a team and the tactics and all the rest we employed. Whereas for me, that was kind of my only big major combat experience for a prolonged time. So for me, every day, it's like, cool, like it was what it was. On to the next thing. Our brains are pragmatic, and what's the next mission? We're not sitting there, dwelling in our own self-importance of how incredible it was. We achieved our mission. We got all the dudes home. We have another mission tomorrow. Job's on. My whole focus was to get the missions done and to get the boys home and to achieve everything we needed. And there was never a chance to... This is one thing that I have been told, and I know I'm very bad at, is celebrating success. It's always sort of what's next. Like, that was what it was. For me, it's just trivial to waste time on celebrating something you have achieved when there's so much more to be done, which kind of takes the flavour out of it, and I need others to help me sort of celebrate success as I go. But yeah, it's only through hindsight, to answer your question. And so many, even it's funny, like my dad, my granddad, who was in Korea and Vietnam, even said, make sure you take the time to savour what you're doing when you're doing it. Keep a journal, things like this. I was just like, no, I'm going to crack on, get it done. I got responsibilities. I don't have time to journal all this. But yeah, I sort of wish I'd taken advice from those who'd been there beforehand.
McConaughey talks about this, in his book he spoke about he wish he journaled more through the good times. We often tend to take time to write, reflect when things aren't going so well in life.
Yeah.
But in actually taking the time to do that through some of the successes and wins, you're almost writing a blueprint for yourself to come back to when things go awry. It's
so true. Like, the last 4 years, I've been writing my memoir, autobiography. A big publisher asked me to write it. Then they pulled out when the ABC stuff happened, and I've been finishing it. And literally this week, I launch it. hestonrussell.com/book. Get online. But it's been an incredible experience to sit there and be forced to reflect. And so much of my rounding the bend and further self-development this last year has been finishing that book. Like, I've literally felt like stress and trauma leave my body as I've been doing it. But to sit there and reflect and remember all the things I have done, and to grab those stories and then sit with them and remember the emotions and feelings and things I learned from them along the way. My brain's just excellent at compartmentalizing things, not from a place of trauma, just because there's too much content in the filing cabinet. And a part of my therapy moving forward is going to be to pick up that book every now and then and reading and remembering.
Love that.
So much of what I have done, your own story. If I had have journaled, I would have done the same. Putting it in a book just makes it nice and concise for me. But yeah, it's so important, and it's been so powerful for me in my self-development as well.
I don't know where I heard it, but someone said most of the lessons we need we've already learned.
Yeah.
And it's often just coming back to that stuff, and that's probably been the pitfall of my journaling and writing over the last couple of years, is I don't come back to it.
Yeah.
Which I think there's a lot of value in that. But I want to put a bookmark on this for a moment and come back to it, because there's one more thing I want to ask you about the funeral notes and the death notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I say get it out of the way, because I don't want you to feel like in an hour I'm just bringing you back into this heightened emotional state of this topic. But people often ask questions like, if this happened, what would you have? You can't ever really go back there, right? No. Because it didn't happen, right? So instead of us playing hypothetical, I'll ask you the question: when you're sitting there writing your own death note and your funeral plans, and you're thinking about the fact that a huge part of who you are, be it your sexuality, has not been expressed or shared with the world at that one point in time, was there ever the fear that if something, God forbid it did, and thankfully it didn't, had have happened to you, that a part of you would have died a secret?
No, well, see, so this was going into the trip 2012 where I wrote those letters, and I wasn't gay. I had decided I wasn't gay. I didn't know what gay was. I was still figuring it all out. And particularly upon joining the Special Forces and then leading up to this extra security clearances and all the rest, I chose, that was not for me. And my mindset, having achieved everything that I achieved, even just to get into the Special Forces, I was confident that I could train myself to be straight, and that this was not relevant to me in my life. My love, my passion was my guys deploying overseas and achieving the missions and everything that I wanted to do since I joined the military. And that was my priority. My sexuality or whatever it might have been or whatever I didn't know about it was not important.
Can I ask though, I fully respect what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you can't train yourself to, when you say train yourself, do you mean just put it to the side for a moment? Or
I trained myself to I'd go pick up chicks, go be physical with chicks. I'd train myself to try and only find women attractive. I'd find myself to train myself to try and find attractive men repulsive. I literally did all these. It's so funny. I love these conversations when I particularly encounter people who use religion as a construct to shame and stigmatize people, to go, your life choice. It's because these are often people who come up to me and they're so impressed with what I have achieved in my life. I'm like, just sit there for a second and appreciate how much I have achieved in my life and how determined I've been to do everything from what I did in service through to the ABC and all the rest. And when I tell you that I put every ounce of my energy into trying to train myself to be straight, and it was only after doing that and after meeting people that I saw not defined by their sexuality that I actually appreciated that I am gay and it's not something that I can change. And then let me know if you think it's truly a life choice. You just don't go around picking this off a shelf. So yeah, I literally went through my own conversion therapy, as it would be. I was petrified when I joined the Special Forces because you have to go through a whole security screening process, including people trailing you, looking into your digital devices. I smashed and burned my old laptop. I logged out of all these things. I, created and destroyed this whole alternate side of me.
One of the best laughs I've had in a while was listening to you talk about going on reconnaissance missions and covert operations.
Mike, the PE teacher, was my alter. Yeah.
To cap on,
yeah, mate.
Sunnies on, newspaper. Think paper? Newspapers.
Newspaper with the eye holes cut out. Yeah.
So good.
All that's, and this is what I love, mate. In my book, I've gone into this in extra detail I've never gone into beforehand. And it's just, at the end of the day, the whole outcome of life is trying to figure out your identity and who you are, and then your part and purpose to play. And for me, I've just had these extreme experiences to try and break down and figure out and work through the tactics and techniques of that, including sexuality, which is one of the most vulnerable elements of it.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing, right? Because I sat here and I contemplated whether I even wanted to ask you about this today for two reasons. The first reason being, it's the least interesting thing about you. And I mean this in the nicest way possible.
Yeah.
Because
but we put it on such a pedestal.
Well, yeah.
Because people are just defined by it. Yeah.
This is the thing.
100%.
It does not define who you are as a human being.
But it took me over a decade to appreciate that. And what I didn't have was someone like me who I could look to and be like, hey, he's not defined by sexuality. Yeah. I didn't get that until I went to the US in 2015 on exchange to their Special Forces and met some of my best friends that I have now who are successful, accomplished people. But there was no one within Special Forces as an officer who was gay that I knew of, that was public about, because it wasn't relevant to our culture or to our creed, and that I was able to draw inspiration and a mentor from. And I was in this construct of life where if I haven't seen anyone else do it, I'm too afraid to be the first.
Because the interesting thing is, on the surface, sometimes you can read someone from the surface. The only thing that's potentially gay about you on the surface is...
He's got a stereotypes now.
How good your skin is.
Mate, I didn't moisturise till I was 30. I'd done 3 trips to Afghanistan before I learned to moisturise.
When I tell you, I cried laughing when I heard you talk about... My brother-in-law and I at home pissed ourselves laughing because we were reminiscing on this moment in one of the podcasts you'd been on, where you spoke about reviewing footage in operational training. I can't remember which it was.
No, it was in combat.
In combat, where you looked at one of your wrist movements and thought, that's a little bit gay. Oh, mate, when I tell you I fucking cried because I just thought that is so... We spoke about it earlier.
I was petrified.
How we're our own worst critics.
Yeah, mate. Oh.
What's the wrist movement?
Petrified. No, literally, it was the Battle of Tagore. It was just incredible. It was some of the best close combat we've had. Like, yeah, it was pretty hairy.
Where is this, sorry?
This is in Afghanistan. Just at the start, we'd inserted off the helicopters. And moved up. I had my pistol shot off my hip. It hit the pistol holster, and I had to tuck my pistol into my pocket. And next thing, we're just into it. And we hadn't encountered... This enemy was like dug in and prepared for us. Like, they had these incredible pieces of black cloth that they used as contained shadow and sat their machine gun back behind. And then just over the wall, they had another weapon waiting for when they withdraw over and leave the machine gun there to then go around. Like, it was, as a military tactician, like, it was good tactics, and it was enjoyable to go up to against like a well-trained and rehearsed enemy. And this one part where all of a sudden this machine gun just arced up at us, and my guys, we all sort of converged to start firing on it. But, you know, there was dudes moving here, and then I just immediately saw the best move was to go around to this flank, which we did, and we eventually got the guy. But it's my mate's helmet camera, and he's shooting, and I'm here, and I needed him to stop shooting, and then so I could run past and get them to follow me to go to the flanker, because people were just getting a bit stagnant there. And I'm like, stop. And then I go to run in front. And as I run past his camera, my hand and my wrist are just doing, like, it's a full 90 degree, as if I'm like, I was like,
so good.
What is that? Like, I don't run like that at all. And for some reason, I just had this stigma of, like, you know, the gay wrist. And I was like, that is the gayest combat run I've ever seen in my life.
That is so fun.
And after a mission, we'd go back and grab the helmet cam footage and review it. We'd hand it to the intelligence staff, and I was like, I don't want to hand this in. I look like a fucking fairy. But then I had this moment just sitting there. I'm like, you were literally like in a two-way shooting range with a dude with a machine gun, and you're worried about how your wrist looks.
Mate,
like
that is what I love about you the most. Is there is nothing stereotypical about who you are as a person.
Oh, mate.
I find that fantastic.
It's a place of discomfort, but it's a place I've learned to get comfortable with.
Let me ask you this. For many people who will be listening to the show, watching this show, myself included as the host, I love wartime combat style movies, and some of my favourite movies are in that world, right? And you often watch one and you think, how true of a depiction of the events of war is this?
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you, instead of, I'll maybe in a minute, I'll get you to tell me what you think the closest depiction is.
Yeah.
But the reason that we question this is movies allow us to, I think I'd be correct in saying, experience maybe two of the senses, visuals and what we can hear.
Yeah.
But when you're in wartime moment, I often find this fascinating to ask people who have lived and experienced moments different to that of my own experience.
Yep.
If you think about all of the senses, like what you can smell in that moment, where there's fucking gunfire going crazy, and what you feel,
how much your ears hurt from how loud it is.
Like, even can you taste something in the air? Like, talk to me about that example you gave just there, where you're reviewing that footage of your hand movements. When you're in a moment like that, what are the senses picking up?
You know, a lot of people talk about like this adrenaline dump, you know, and like for me, all the senses were just hyper engaged. You probably heard this thing called like hypervigilance. Yeah. Like I just would go to this plane of like again, not having this concern or fear for your own safety, because you know you have the skills and drills and experience to do all the things you've been trained to do, and just to allow that to go. But the whole thing is just being hyper focused on every action that you do. I think in particular, it's the rush of energy that you get to project in front of you. I don't know if I explained that very well, but in combat, you're wearing like heavy stuff. It's hot. It's dirty. It's so uncomfortable. You have a metal helmet. You have like a helmet clanging on your head. Like, it is just such a strain on the body, and it is so uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden, like when you're into it, all of that washes away. And all of a sudden, you're just here present in front of yourself and aware and around yourself, and just looking and moving and listening, smelling, tasting, feeling. All the senses are just heightened. Your mindset is less focused on being aware of anything that could detract from your performance, and more aware of what could help feed your performance. You know, you're not seeing if there's a metallic taste in your mouth, or worrying if your ears are ringing, or if you've like whacked your knee or whatever. Like, everything is just there and present. And the key part about combat is that this is where I feel movies lose it. It's a whole bunch of those moments put together. There's also these massive lulls where there's nothing. And all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, my pistol got shot off my hip. Why am I dragging my pistol behind me on the lanyard? And then it's bam and it's go again. And it's just pretty incredible to just embrace how incredible the human body is, particularly when you've put it through that training and preparation, to kind of allow it to sometimes autopilot and almost feel like you're sitting in the seat of your own body, but you're up here controlling all the senses, making sure you're focusing where all that you're doing is going into. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I remember I had this biggest laugh this one moment in Afghanistan again. Me and one of my guys were walking between these two compounds, kind of in a bit of a lull of a bit of a contact with a bunch of enemy. And just next thing, like, there's a difference between like a crack and a zip when rounds travel next to you. And you just know when something's so much closer. All of a sudden, this round traveled so close to me and made such a noise that next thing, all I remember was I went from standing vertical to like on the ground, literally faster than gravity. Like the speed at which my body autopilot threw itself to the ground, I literally just remember in that split millisecond turning to the dude and laughing, going, how the fuck did that happen? And I was talking about how did I go from here to here?
Yeah.
Because I made zero conscious decision.
Yeah.
About how that happened. And all I see him is looking at the wall next to us where like 50 rounds are just blazing up. And I'm just like, my body's great. Like, my instincts are great. Thank you for taking over and saving my life.
Wow.
And just laughing my ass off because it was just so completely involuntary.
You know what I love? So one of the things that's fascinating me right here is we're sitting here. You have such a good personality.
Mate, the whole thing is, I think I'm just this big child. Like, again, I keep saying, going back to this childlike curiosity, like, I used to take myself so serious, thinking I needed to be this, thinking I needed to be this masculine special forces dude. But every single time I found the greatest effectiveness in life and enjoying life and helping others is just by being like who I am deep down. And it's a kid who wants to connect with people and has cool stories to tell, but also loves hearing about other people's experiences. And like, life is funny and enjoyable, and it's so easy for it to be serious and hard. So when I'm in my flow and when I allow myself to be that kid, that's when I'm my best. But trust me, it often goes back the other way as well.
So let me ask you this then, because you often hear people who come back from a place like Afghanistan, and I'm not going to pretend that I know a lot of people, but you hear these stories, I'm interested in it, so I listen to interviews, and you hear that people can have a level of skepticism about humanity, because you exist in a place in which you can't necessarily put a spotlight on your enemy at all times.
Nope.
So for you to be as childlike as you are, and you just kind of touched on it then, that you can ebb and flow out of that. Has there been any skepticism for humanity or judgment of humanity that's come from your experiences in war?
Massive. Like, I've developed, and I've said this before, and I've developed like a deep resentment for Australia. And when I say that, I don't mean the people, I mean like the government and those in the military and political power. Like, it kind of embarrasses me that I dedicated my life and asked so many amazing young men to dedicate their lives in the service to these people who do not deserve the efforts and actions that I saw people perform over there, and the lives and sacrifices made over there from political parties that couldn't maintain a proper strategy, between elections, or who don't actually care about anything other than being in power and how they're perceived, who haven't spoken up when the media, who's never stepped foot on a battlefield, has decided to call us fucking war criminals. Even after I won in the federal court, still being too cowardly to come off their political platform and show some form of courage, let alone leadership, to again justify any of the actions and energies. So you can tell there's part of me that if I want to lean into everything that I see bad in the world, like, it has taken me to places where you just feel like you don't feel relevant, you don't want to participate anymore, and you're going to be trapped in this eternal frustration, negativity and toxicity, and just be an angry person sitting at home sending angry emails to people for the rest of your life. And it's a choice to identify the cup as half empty and half full, and choose which part of those you really want to weigh into for that day, and which part makes you and those you love happier.
We might talk about the dichotomy of leadership later, something that I find
Dichotomy of leadership. You're good. I like this. This man's well educated and well read. I like it. I was not using these words that you're...
I've got 5 words on the floor. I just got a list of fancy words to use.
That's good.
I do want to ask, you just sort of touched on it there, that it's really interesting because the question I asked you was about maybe becoming skeptical of who the enemy can be, right?
Oh, but no, the enemy's back home, mate.
This is what I find really interesting, because of your experience.
Yeah. Who
maybe you entered your military career to be your ally.
Yeah.
And I love how you you create the distinction between the Australian people, the Australian government.
Massively.
Because that's obviously, I can tell how important the people of this country are to you.
Yeah. The people are the one who've given me hope. Like, literally, mate, if walking the streets around here, every now and then I just get stopped by someone that I have never met before in my life. And they're just like, you don't know me, but what you're doing, I believe in and is inspiring, and please keep going.
Yeah.
It's so easy for the squeaky wheel to be what we think is the majority, but it really is the minority.
Mate, and so you deserve to be stopped and thanked as well. But I want to ask you, is there a moment in your time in the military, 16 years, in which you stopped and started to see it very differently? Because purpose is huge to you.
Yeah.
And I love I could talk about the topic of purpose all day.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing a quote, I hope I haven't butchered this, but you said, war begins where diplomacy fails.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or something along
100%.
those lines, right? Was there a moment in time where you realised that diplomacy and government and what was happening back home had changed to a degree in which you lost your purpose in your military career?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, war only happens because politicians fail their job when diplomacy fails. I hated how easily people, beat the war drum or talk about gunboat diplomacy, failing to appreciate that comes at the cost of the sacrifice of young men and women, even if it's not in physical lives, but in what goes into providing that service, as you touched on at the start. I want to just quickly touch on one thing I have appreciated from my military career and since is that the people we were fighting against on the ground were just like us. They believed in what they were doing, and we might by our standards say they were evil. And in my opinion, so many of them were absolutely evil for the way in which they targeted women and children as a part of achieving their strategic outcomes. But for them, that was acceptable. And it's just having that perspective to appreciate, their unique mindset as well. And at the end of the day, it's just pitting two wills against each other.
That's probably the only way that you can tactically approach it too, right? Because...
well, so many people go into that like they're wrong, we're right. And as opposed to like, hey, this person's fighting for what they believe in just like we are. Is
that dangerous from an on-ground soldier's perspective?
I don't think so. I think the smarter you are, the more informed you are. It's then making the decision. At the end of the day, it's black and white for me. I have a mission to achieve.
Oh, sorry. I mean, is the ignorance of just going wrong versus right, can that be dangerous?
Really good question. It's probably so much more effective for those who are pulling the strings to achieve their outcomes. It's more dangerous if there is a lack of authenticity and credibility to the reason why you're doing things, to have people on the ground thinking.
I guess if you're the conductor of the orchestra.
That's it, mate. Like, you want people to and a lot of the military's training is to simply have people conform to, accepting the orders given. The incredible experience I had from Special Forces was the whole culture I had was free thinkers. I just couldn't simply say to my people, do this. If it was the wrong thing, they'd challenge me on it, regardless of my rank. And it was incredible. And it required you to really dot your I's and cross your T's and do your job. At the end of the day, they respected your position. But yeah, there was definitely no just blindly leading into things.
All right, you've just brought up something fascinating that I have to ask. So you can obviously identify the difference in mindset and character traits of people who are in the military as standard officers, but then also in Special Forces. There is a change somewhere there, right?
There was just, in my experience from my time in the military, there was a completely different culture for a reason. And particularly in Special Forces, we selected people and cultivated a culture for a specific purpose that achieved greater outcomes.
Of the people you selected, and I know you've had a hand in selection courses and all of this, there's two parts to this question. People often talk about, nature, nurture. Nature being the way that you were born, the natural state, versus nurture, the way that your experiences, your teachers, your mentors, the lessons of your life mold you.
Yeah.
Is the special forces mindset one or the other? Is it a combination of both?
Both.
Okay. And in the nurture nature element, when you take both of those combinations, what are the key attributes or traits, or even just like one key attribute or trait that you see as a consistent recurring theme in the people that you selected to be the highest performers?
Well, this is what I love about the Commando selection course. You're literally assessing people on the Commando values that have been filtered down from what we find to be the best cultural fit, that we can also then train with the incredible resources and equipment and people we have to achieve the specific tactical skill sets to achieve the objectives, etc. It's an incredible backcasting process. At the end of the day, the selection course is designed to break people down physically and mentally to reveal who they are at a true and emotional and authentic level. And the key element, I'll just simply say, is it comes down to service, the ability to put mission and team before yourself, the ability to literally, if need be, sacrifice yourself for the mission and for the team. And then there are other attributes such as trainability, your ability to very rapidly learn and then apply things you've learned. That's that whole adaptability into the environment, the different mission sets, all that we need. And then particularly for remote commando skill set, like teamwork, was just teamwork and initiative were just two huge elements. You needed people who were proactive self-starters, looking for work, as we say, and who knew that they were always a part of a team and how to work within and support and reinforce their team. And I say that because there are other elements of the Special Forces where teamwork wasn't such a high attribute, because there is more individualistic requirements, and there are different values and different nature and nurture outcomes that people are required to, be selected on and apply. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
There's a lot more to it than that, but that's just sort of like a surface level synopsis.
Let me ask you a surface level question then. If you're, there's a young man listening to this podcast, watching, young woman who love the idea of being that kind of person, Special Forces operator. Let's park the mental component, because that's probably a very long conversation for a moment.
The biggest component, yeah.
But let's think about the physical. Like, you're in great physical shape.
Yeah.
And if you put that shirt on me, it's showing some different curves in some different places, right?
There's a massive difference between aesthetics and fitness, though.
So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
What is, if you were to select the best potential training protocol without bringing it down to the rep, but let's just look at it from a top-down approach. What is the best physical training you can do to prepare yourself for Special Forces or Commando selection?
Well, the whole organisation that goes into it is so mature these days that, it's the same as when I did it. They actually, should you apply for Special Forces, they'll give you a Special Forces training program to lead up into it. Like mine, I completed the 12-week program back in the day, and it covers off on everything from cardio fitness through to pack marching with 30 kilos on your back for 15, 20 kilometres.
Why 30 kilos? Is that the weight of the gear?
That's just me picking a number.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure it was like 30 kilos was like just a good training figure. At the end of the day, you're never going to be fit enough. And from running selection courses, those who had never been pushed past their physical capabilities beforehand were the first to leave. We'd had former, national level sports stars, Ironmen, things like this try out beforehand. And they had never, for prolonged periods of time, truly been pushed outside of their fitness comfort level. They could push themselves to achieve their own levels, but they'd never been completely taken out of their own comfort level and environment of physical exertion. At the end of the day, we get to the end of the selection course where you're doing 4 hours worth of tire flipping, treading water with your hands above your head, feeling like you're going to drown, carrying the most ridiculous things, to the point where we had to stop activities because these people were going to try and pick something up and dislocate their own shoulder before stopping themselves. And at that point, you've got the right person that you can train to achieve whatever. At the same time, you don't want them to be so silly to dislocate their own shoulder, don't get me wrong, but they are just willing to sacrifice themselves for the mission or the team.
You know what you call that? Establishing some fucking mongrel. That's what that is. That is mongrel behaviour.
Well, it's actually just this incredible point where people are able to become self-actualized in the fact that they can go further than they think they can. That their head is actually what's holding them back. their body is so much more capable than most people think they can achieve. And it's creating the environment through physical tasks, through water, through, conditions of the environment, to force them to have to go through those barriers where they're like, I literally can't do this. And that's why you probably heard me talk about beforehand. 80 to 90% of the people in the selection course pull out their form and withdraw themselves. They reach one of those barriers and they decide that they can't go any further. And it's only once people are forced to go through one of those barriers or multiple of those barriers is when they actually appreciate, I can do this.
I've heard Andrew Huberman talk about this because people often say, how much of it is mental, how much is physical? And he's like, it's actually 100% nervous system. Because in order for your body to fire physically and mentally, your nervous system has to process that. I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right, by the way.
Yeah,
so caveat here.
That's fine.
But it's like it's 100% of both is essentially what he's saying.
Yeah, it's 100% of both.
You need to be in both of those states at all times to operate at that high level of performance. Yeah. And I think it's fascinating. There is, as I said earlier, one of the things I love is watching someone who's in their flow, who is so dialed in at what they do that regardless of what comes up, they have pure high agency. They are the tap.
Yeah.
And I can literally picture you at the end of selection course. You've seen that video of that college football player and he's talking about his team. He's doing that interview and he's like, Eden Dennis, dog. Like you're there with the paper.
Mate.
Heston Russell, dog.
Mate, I thought I was going to fail my selection course when I did it. I stuffed up this one last thing. I've written about it all in my book. It's a long story. But the selection course is just incredible. Because also it just comes down to being able to control at the end of the day, it comes down to being able to control your emotions. You talk about physical and mental, it's actually all about emotions. And like there's just this graduating scale of, the first layer and level that people are in their comfort zone is like their physical performance and getting themselves as fit as they can. But when they're not fit enough for the environment, then they go into the mental space. And it's our emotions that actually help us control that mental space and not being controlled by our emotions, if that makes sense. It should really be like, yes, like this is hard, to be aware this is hard, but I've put in the work, I'm now being pushed beyond, everyone else is exceeding myself. Does that mean I'm not as good as them? You go into this comparative state, all the rest, or they isolate you and you have no feedback mechanism and you're questioning whether you're good enough.
So let me ask you that then, how does emotion coexist with high performance?
Your ability to control your emotions and not be controlled by your emotions, in my opinion, is the absolute secret to the highest levels of performance.
And is the only way to train that to take people to the brink?
Absolutely. I mean, experience, 100%. And for me, the ultimate level of performance comes from a place where you're actually able to harness your emotions, your passion to be inspired, to allow yourself to be inspired by others and to not then have that completely take over. I think that has been what I've learned in reflection. That was kind of a bit of my own superpower as a leader, as a commander, was I was willing to show emotion. That was authentic emotion. I never put it on. The guys used to always say, like, when we'd see you get passionate about something, like we knew, like Hesto believes. And it was always from a place of, mutual respect and from a place of the right thing as opposed to what I thought was right. I remember one of the hardest times for me in my life was when Scott died and I'd literally, picked up his pieces of his body to take him back to be flown home. And just the amazing surge of emotions that comes from one, physically doing that, two, being the commander responsible for the person you've just lost and thinking about his family back home and feeling like you failed. And then all of a sudden having the next 2 days to go and fight the people still out there who you knew do this to your guy, and having all of the military power in the world where I can call down the finger of God to smite my enemies from everything else in between, and to not want to go out there and do it from a place of revenge, being the guy in command and in control and with my team who are ready to follow me as is required, but who would absolutely check me if ever I was overstepping that. And just, you can imagine the emotions out there. And that hardest moment for me in my leadership career was channeling that emotion into responsibility, not into any form of whatever I wanted those emotions to be otherwise.
Channel emotion into responsibility. That's a fucking bumper sticker if I've ever heard one.
Well, my whole piece with leadership is just simply two lenses: responsibility or entitlement. And everything in life. It's like, are you doing this for a responsible reason, or are you doing it for an entitled reason? And that is just my azimuth check on everything. Like, my whole philosophy on leadership is a service you provide to others. The day you lose it and become a failed leader is when you think it's being served by others. And it's the whole same thing with your emotions. Like, it's this whole responsibility versus entitlement piece, in my opinion.
So you've probably given me the perfect segue to come to what we were going to discuss at
Let's
some
do
point,
it.
the dichotomy of
I feel like you're
leadership.
good at segues anyway.
Just because I like a yap, you can always find a way.
Same.
It's interesting because you hear people often say, and they use this example particularly in politics because it's probably a very real world experience and a real world arena in which people can commentate on and see stuff. And you've perked up here, you've sat up straight because I can tell.
Politics is not leadership, and that's the biggest thing I found. Politics is a fucking game. Politics is about power and manipulating people to achieve outcomes. Like, there's diplomacy, and then there's leadership, and then there's whatever we've allowed this game of politics to be, where we think people in authority are leaders or have leadership. Like, the fundamentals of leadership 101, the day you have to rely on your authority or use your authority to protect yourself or your opinions is the day you become a failed leader. And rant.
Mate, it's so beautifully put and simply put. Oh. And I want to pull on that thread. So people will often say that the best leaders are the people who don't necessarily want to lead from a power perspective, but they're the people who, exactly as you have said many times throughout the course of this conversation, are called to lead in service of others. Now, you pulled on the thread of Australian politics and global politics in many regards. Can you think of the last great leader that we've had as Prime Minister of this country?
Oh, I just want to preface this conversation. The one thing I've truly realised the last few years, writing my book and all the rest, is that I was trained to be an expert in leadership and planning. Within a special forces team or unit, everyone has their own specialty traits. I had to spend 4 years going to ADFA and RMC in Canberra before I was allowed to become the lowest ranking officer and be in charge of a team of 30 as the leader, as a platoon commander. And there is a specific science, like there are fundamentals and principles of leadership. Then there's the art where you develop and apply those, and leadership styles and all the rest. I did a podcast with Julia Gillard. I did a podcast with Tony Abbott. And I asked them, like, what professional training did you get in leadership? None. The whole political system in Australia is the leader of our country, the Prime Minister, is not selected by the people. They're selected by the party.
I heard you say this morning, and I stopped for a second and thought, what does he mean? Then I realised what you meant.
We are literally having this conversation the day that they've called the election. And you're going to watch the media, who, along with politics, is the only other most influential role in Australia you don't need any formal qualification to fucking do, turn this into a Dutton versus Albanese race. Whereas they are just simply who the party has elected to be their leader because, and I've spent a lot of time in Canberra behind the scenes being asked by political parties to run for them, they have the weight of support in their party for whatever reasons, for whatever factions, for whatever dirt they have on anywhere else, or for whatever outcomes the true people pulling the strings want to have. They are not there for the greater service of Australia. They are there to beat the other team and to be in power.
Which is what I hate about what we're experiencing right now in media, and particularly on social media, because it influences so many of the opinions, beliefs and thoughts that people have in the generation of, through as young as 12, 13, 11, jumping on social media through to now 60, 70. People consume more social media than they consume other news. And I love how people say social media is not real life. It is if you spend 6 hours a day scrolling on Instagram.
I think there's also an incredible opportunity there, particularly for all those people you just said. Like, if you release this podcast before the election, like, hopefully it might have influence on some people's votes. Like, that's the reality of it, For me, I like trying to the way my destructive mindset works in trying to understand things, I try and go back to, like, where did this originate from? Or how did we arrive at this place? When we go to the election, think about it. Back in the day when we lived in tribes, mate, we would come together to elect or choose by some format who we wanted to represent us based on whatever qualities the tribe needed for our greatest survival or progression at that time. Be it a physical fight to the death, or they're the wisest or most experienced, most emotionally intelligent, any of this. the political game and politics that we've played into Australia is, red versus blue parties. We don't elect our true leader. We're electing this party based on things like policies and economics, based on promises they make at election time, which time and time again are proven they don't follow through, but people get caught up in the media hype that's created. Go back and look at the track record. Go back and look at the people. I just wish that every single person who's going to vote sits there and decides to elect the person in their electorate that they're happy to stand there for the next 3 years and say, I elected that person to represent me. Not the party, not anyone. Just research the short list of candidates who in your political electorate are putting themselves up to be selected. Who they are as people. Don't look at their policies. Sure, look at their policies to see what their vision is, but go back and have a look at their character traits, what they've done in life, and whether you truly believe they are the right people to lead you in politics. And this is what we did when we selected people for the Commando course. You're selecting the right person because when the mission changes, when the vision changes, when they're able to be corrupted by big business, by whoever else, who are they going to be behind closed doors? And do you assess them to be someone that you'd be proud for them to be making decisions on your behalf?
Let me ask you this. So I love the idea of, in any walk of life, the top filter of deciding whether you want to align yourself with someone is to filter first their character.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you look at politics, a huge part of the criticism that a lot of politicians face, or at least one part of the criticism, is them changing their stance on different things at different times. And it's a fickle beast, change, because on one hand, if you're changing your belief because you're trainable and you're adaptable and you're recognizing that what you once thought to be true no longer works, and you're changing your belief for the better, I think that's a trait to be admired.
Agreed.
But I think that what we see too much of at the moment is people changing their narrative so that it looks good in public perception, but isn't necessarily the case when they follow through with action. So how do you decipher that adaptability as a strength in a politician as opposed to a performative trait?
Really good questions. And it really, I think, touches on so much of the greater issues, again, with this game of politics and this beast we've created in Australia. I remember, you can imagine overseas, like you're out on a mission and you've planned up, you've delivered orders, everyone knows their part, you go through all these rehearsals before you actually get there on the ground, and everyone knows, like, in case all the radios go down, you sort of know what are the physical decision points or physical actions or the timings that are to be met to then progress into the next phase of an operation and all the rest. There's this, we used to use this key phrase on the radio. It's like, all call signs, the situation has changed. And immediately everyone knows, like, something has happened. They need to listen up for changes to be made to the plan. It's like the situation has changed. The enemy has not responded in the way in which we need to, or, we no longer have as many helicopters we need for extraction. Therefore, be prepared to receive the new plan. What we have created in this fake leadership bubble that is the current political landscape in Australia is leaders who are so beholden to their authority being the definition of their ability to be a leader or be seen as a leader, as opposed to putting in the detail that I was required to before I was ever allowed to step outside on a mission with my team and do the detail in the planning and have anyone look at it and pick holes from it and involve everyone you can in the planning process so that the ultimate plan you come up with is the very best to achieve the outcomes. Instead, we have people who feel like they need to make these policies, make their processes, stand firm to talk to, those people that are part of their following, as opposed to our mission is to put Australia first and its people and to progress our way of life and our nation. And this is how we're going to do that. And this is the formal planning process and strategy that we're going to abide by. Instead of, we're going to win you over so we get the numbers so we can then go in there and push through whatever policies we meet, and then trying to be liked by everyone to be voted from. And I'll 100% say it's the difficulty of being a leadership and likability. It's an extremely hard part, but I'll tell you what, when you're an excellent and effective leader who employs leadership to inspire people and puts in the detail to be competent at your job and plan and communicate why you're doing what you're doing, people will not only like you, they will respect you. And what we have lost is people who respect politicians. They're simply choosing the better of the worst ones out there. They're no longer inspired by these people. The tactics they're using are the carrot or the stick. We'll give you this tax cut, or these people over here, they'll let all these immigrants in and you won't be able to have a home and all the rest. They're motivating people through fear instead of through inspiration. And at the end of the day, people are being forced to choose on, ideological grounds as opposed to what's the best for all of us together, instead of, no, my opinion's better than yours, so I want my party to beat you. We've just lost this open discussion and deliberate planning. I pray for a hung parliament. I pray for people to vote in more independents and minor parties who are going to be held accountable by people going to their election offices every day of the 3 years they're in office to hold them to account to what they've said. To force these people to come together in those giant planning rooms I've seen in Parliament and actually plan, as opposed to one party having the numbers, going away and deciding whatever policies they want, and then offering all these perks to maybe one or two minor parties or independents they need in order to get their policy through. Like, that's not leadership. That's not planning. That's deceitful. That's politics. That's not what actually progresses people. It what puts us in this seesaw of developing on what way someone thinks that they should be done.
I won't pretend to be any kind of political expert, right? But
you don't. Neither am I, mate. I'm just experienced from what I'm saying. That's all.
Well, I think that it's such a weird world that we exist in, because a lot of people are talking about politics, more people than usual, and everyone,
good. Yeah.
And there is like very strong opinions, right? And I think I completely agree with what you said. Most opinions,
you don't have to, by the
way. No, but I do, because most opinions are more ideological.
Yeah.
Than they are rooted in what we want as a country to move forward.
Absolutely.
But it is interesting, isn't it? Because I heard Rory Sutherland, who I don't know if you've ever heard Rory, but he's
terrible with names, but I might have.
Rory's an incredibly, impeccably dressed British man who is an advertising and marketing genius.
Okay.
He's the vice chairman of Ogilvy, which is one of the biggest advertising brands in the world. Goes on a lot of podcasts and has all of these incredibly irrational, illogical ideas. He's got a great saying, and I'm not saying this word for word here. I am... What's the word I'm looking for? I am...
Summarising?
I
don't know.
Paraphrasing.
Paraphrasing, there we go.
But essentially, he says that like all the logical ideas have been taken and used.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to employ irrational ideas and thoughts to have change and real change.
Yeah.
And I heard him on a podcast with Alex O'Connor, the Cosmic Skeptic, for anyone who knows him.
This guy's on it. He's on it. And wow. Boom.
He was saying that a friend of his had this idea that when you fail to recognize someone to actually vote for, and you're sitting back and thinking, well, who's the lesser of the two evils, for lack of a better phrase, maybe you should think about voting the people in who will balance the power in the parliament. Yeah. So those independents and those people who will actually bring a greater balance. He was saying, and I think his example was something like, there should be at least 10% representation of the Greens in Parliament, right? Because we need to somewhat think about climate and politics. It doesn't mean that they have to be the major party, and I'm just using the example that he gave over in Britain, right? So it's obviously it's different everywhere. But I think it's an interesting thought, like thinking about bringing people together for the greater good of humanity and for our country, as opposed to the power of one party who has one idea and one belief.
Well, this is the issue where we have parties that only bring in people who share their specific ideology.
Yes.
I mean, the most amazing thing I appreciated was the foundation of Special Forces planning and success was the group planning environment, where at different, you follow the deliberate military appreciation process that had phases and stages and back briefs and products to produce along the way. And then it has the whole wargaming element where you bring in people who bring in the crazy Ivans, who think completely differently, who have a different perspective of something, who are just belligerent and hate authority and want to challenge whatever plan they face. And you poke absolute holes in the plan to then continue to break it down, rebuild it, and you have the best plan at the end of the day. And that's from focusing on purpose and people and the outcomes. What we have on the moment is political parties who set their ideology and then select people who follow their ideology, as opposed to people who have the full spectrum of real world experiences and don't have to be anti anything, but have this mindset of, right, I don't usually think that way, but let's go to the professionals, let's go to the data, let's walk the streets and speak to the people, something that most politicians can't do without being heckled in this everyday environment, and inform ourselves on the gaps that we don't know about. We keep selecting these inferior political leaders, in my opinion. Politicians want to be leaders, in my opinion, who see any knowledge gaps or experience gaps they have as something to hide and to protect, as opposed to, this is the number one thing we're taught as officers. Someone asks you a question, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to go do the work and get an answer back to you. You know, answering questions to the media right there and then is not national strategy setting us up for generational success. It's pandering to a news cycle to convince someone to win a vote so then you can go and do whatever you want, and then develop another marketing campaign so they forget what you didn't do in 3 years' time.
We have to remove PR from politics.
No, we have to get, even same, mate, for my issue, it's the talent vacuum that is in politics and media. Having people go from school to high school to a political party staff to then become a politician, or people who go from school to high school to then work in a media agency. You were saying it right at the start of this conversation about, you know, the template we do in life, going through school and whatnot. Flip that on its head. Imagine if we had a society that encouraged people to go through school and then go out and live and explore the world for 1, 2, 5, 10 years. From a logical perspective, you're your youngest and your fittest and your most eye-opened and less molded into a specific template. So you can then come back and put all of that life experience into whatever job you have. And I guarantee, while you may not think you're progressing in that 5 to 10 years that you're out exploring the world, the magnification or the tempo of your success that you achieve after that is going to be on such a higher scale than you could ever achieve from that standing start you have coming from one institution to a next template. You know, same thing, you can see those people who are perhaps effective natural leaders or good politicians. Most of them have gone away and lived lives, run businesses, do whatever, but then they get pushed into this funnel that is what you're meant to do in your stovepipe to appeal to your people. People are afraid to be centralist or generalist. You need to be hyper. You need to be yelling at the camera. You need to be the random person that does this or does that. You need to be this brand. It comes from a place of discomfort, but supreme comfort in knowing who you are or what you stand for to go against that grain and, in my opinion, show that true moral courage and true leadership. I know it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but like, this is all I do is sit there and analyze this stuff. And behind the scenes, I've seen some incredible people who are actually great leaders within politics, but because they don't toe the party line or, you know, are willing to compromise on their morals or ethics, they will sadly, unlikely ever be in a leadership position of their party or, you know, in leadership of this country.
I don't think I need to add anything to that. So it's just the slam poetry, you know, the clicking, you know.
Well, I mean, and it takes generational change, mate. It takes people watching this to, first and foremost, hold these fuckers accountable when they go to vote. Yeah. Don't get carried away by the amount of taxpayers' money they are allowed to spend on their political advertising to win back through votes is ridiculous. To remember what these people have done, to look into who they are, their personal character traits, and to vote on a personal level. Like, who do I want making decisions for me and my family?
Yeah.
And then to encourage those around them who they think are good leaders or have great life experience or are in it for the right reasons, to potentially put their hat and hand up into politics and to get around and to support those independent people who are willing to do that. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, you're not in a party, you've got no chance. You know, you talked about who's a great leader. You know, having a great conversation with one of my soldiers who's so much smarter than me just yesterday. You know, look at Gandhi. Gandhi was, you know, this religious leader who didn't have any authority, mate, but he just really identified what was going on and went and built a ground-up movement and ended up, you know, achieving incredible outcomes, not only for his own people, but also for the rest of the world and the spiritual movement he went on to lead. You know, it didn't come from a place of wanting power. It came from a place of wanting to do the right thing, and a grassroots movement that inspires people into action is the ultimate outcome of leadership. You know, the role of a leader is to unite people with purpose, and doing that through inspiration sets the foundations for the most strongest culture that can ever be formed.
Mate, I love that.
Yeah, well, that's my whole philosophy of leadership. The role of a leader is to unite people with purpose, and the way you do that sets the culture. You know, the if I could do it visually, people, purpose, lines in between, that's the culture that's formed. And the ultimate form of leadership is inspiring people, is motivating people through inspiration.
Can I make one last hard pivot?
Do it.
So,
If you can see his deadpan face, can I make one last hard pivot?
well, I was going to say, I was going to make a joke of it and say the situation has changed.
I love that.
Right?
Wear your polar bear fleece.
Yeah,
I love it.
Not real polar bear for any of the animal acts.
I would never.
But I do want to ask you, and
Yeah.
I hate, we're laughing, but I'm going to ask you a serious question.
Do it.
I heard you speak about, and I'm sure you'll touch on it more in the book, which I'm very excited to read or listen to, more likely listen to.
HestonRussell.com.
Heston Russell /book.
/book. You'll find
book.
it. The pop-up will get you.
I want to ask you about, you spoke about the period in your life in which, you know, you didn't have the 4-year battle with the media, the period in which you'd come out of the military. I think it's in between, where you spoke about this loss of purpose, this loss of connection to your place in the world, and this, dare I say, like suicidal ideation.
Mm-hmm.
And your dog actually bringing you out of it. Can you talk to me about that period of your life and what that stemmed from?
Yeah. It's really fascinating because I just used to think of this as the classic veteran journey. Loss of purpose, loss of community, and loss of identity are 3 of the key findings that the recent Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide identified as like impacting mental ill health and suicidality. And it's coming from an institution where you're, service before self, you're issued with an identity, you're part of this greater good, you're able to achieve that level of self-actualization and performance that becomes that constant high water mark we spoke about beforehand. And the, juxtaposition I say is, and I went from that to, my greatest responsibility that day being taking my sausage dog for a walk, and the hardest part is being to have achieved this incredible level of performance where I literally never reached my capacity of what I could achieve in the most dangerous and serious experiences for the right reasons with the most incredible people, and how empowering and justified that felt to, a value set that you're not prepared for. I said beforehand, trading selflessness for selfishness, responsibility for entitlement, not feeling connected to people around me because I just couldn't see us sharing the same value set. And also not having developed my emotions to understand like vulnerability was not weakness and this, that, and the other. So it really was this very hard landing where you might exist in this world outside the military, but your life is the military, and everything you do out here is just preparing you for when you're back inside there. And I never had to, have deep and meaningful conversations about my emotions. Being in a relationship and not being comfortable talking about how jealous I felt, all these sorts of things. Like I never had a romantic partnership during my entire military career, and only allowed myself to do that at that part where I was sort of getting out.
And that's a long time without life's best feeling, love,
Well, it was part of the reason why I decided to eventually get out. I found this new emotion and I allowed it to control me for a bit, and it was pretty cool. But it was just this whole mix of feelings and emotions and things I wasn't prepared for, that also came from a place of the perspective of how much I had achieved and how incredible I'd felt in that flow and all the rest, to just think, there's something wrong with me. I've sort of gone through my use by date. I've achieved the best that I can. The rest of life is sort of too hard. I don't find relevance here. And also at a point where too many of my guys were taking their own lives long after we'd been in combat, and trying to lobby and campaign and get people to pay attention to it, and thinking the sacrifice of my life was literally what was required to get the final cut through, because I had more of a public and social media profile and all the rest. It was a pretty sort of despairing place to be in, but it was also a very motivating place that, one, ended up snapping me into gear, but two, has provided me just this incredible reflection of how important, focusing on having connection with people, understanding your own identity and appreciating the power of purpose has sort of led me to now.
It's interesting, right? Because people often, in their moments of feeling lost or in despair with what life really means, and talk about going from having such a fixed purpose in the military and in the special forces, and I've played around with these ideas. At times in my life I felt lost. We all do, right? I think that's part of the human experience. And you, in your moments of feeling lost and grabbing for something, you ask the question of like, what does life actually mean? What is this experience of life about? And I think the thing that I've come to this point in my life is that the meaning of life is rather that we give life meaning. And like, I look at someone like yourself now, and I was just thinking about, mate, you're such a good dude. Like, I've enjoyed this chat so much today, and I think,
likewise.
Like, I hope we get to continue chatting post here today, and I almost kind of want to pull this up selfishly so we can have a chat off camera and stuff after as well. But I was just thinking that, you know, I think the highest order of love in life is devotion. Yeah. And like, your deep sense of devotion for what was your military career, what has been the fight of your life against the media the last couple of years, which will now be channeled into hopefully things, and I know this is so against your nature, that are a little bit more self-serving in the sense of finding someone to have as a life partner and to enjoy life together. And you will, my friend, you will. Yeah. And I just think there is hopefully so much good ahead of you because you deserve it. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming here today, sharing a conversation with me. I'm glad we could go against the grain of maybe some different stuff that you haven't had the opportunity to talk about on camera and behind the mic. But, mate, I'm just so glad to, you know, are you in a good place now? Yeah, mate, no, I appreciate it. And I want to take my hat off to you. Like, you actually genuinely asked some different questions, and even some questions in some different ways that I've had beforehand. It's actually funny how I find in, you know, particularly, you know, conversations like with yourself and with Sam, you know, you can see that you have this sort of admiration for me and what I've done, but it's sitting here and actually sit where you are and have this admiration of like where you are in your point of life, because I wasn't there at mine. Being public about your opinions is what I call this level of moral courage. At your age, I was excellent at physical courage. I was excellent at doing my job, but it was behind the scenes for a purpose for my team. And I can also just get a sense from the questions you're asking, like there is this curiosity, this, as the Greeks say, you know, you enter in these conversations with a philosophia as opposed to a philonike. You're not looking to like have victory in your opinion. You're looking to openly discuss and learn. Whereas again, at your age, I was much more closed-minded to being willing to learn and be influenced by others. So I think that's an excellent character trait. And I genuinely appreciate you taking your time and using your platform to allow me to do that myself, and, you know, where the minds meet, perhaps help someone else in their own journeys having this, because these are the conversations I wish I had access to when I was questioning so much about myself and my identity. And it's conversations like these that I've learned through doing my podcast and others that really help and impact people. So well done to you, mate. Thank you. And I'll just say as a preface for everyone listening, you know, what you said there makes it sound like I have so much certainty over things. But mate, even just a couple of days ago, I'm sitting there going, man, how, like, because this thing, I've been doing this for 5 years, Heston, you know, like 270 episodes or something close. And jeez Louise. You know, like, you can sometimes feel, you know, that meme, it's a photo of the guy who's like picking through the dirt looking for the diamonds. Yeah. And he stops just before the diamond, frustrated, and turns back. And then the other guy who keeps picking just that next bit through. You can feel like sometimes when you're trying to make something happen because you care about it and you love it and you've got such a deep sense of purpose for it, that you're knocking at the door and you're banging at the wall and you just can't seem to break through. And coming back to all the time, this thing that, you know, at times in life you get lost, you go off track, you leave yourself in order to find that all of these things you thought were important are transitory and ephemeral, and they're here and they're gone tomorrow. And ultimately you find yourself back at yourself. And it's, for me, I get so much joy out of what we've been able to do here today. And I mean this when I say it, my favourite conversation in a very long time, because the fact that we could go somewhere different is a great reminder to just lean into that authenticity. Absolutely. You know, and ask the questions you want to ask and be yourself. And so, mate, thank you so much. That's enough of me gibbering and yabbering. No, pleasure. Really has been an enjoyable conversation. This is the stuff I live for, so I really appreciate it. Mate, thank you. Everyone, go check out the book, hestonrussell.com/book. Check out this man on social media. Get around what will hopefully be a very exciting next few years of your life. Let's see. One step at a time. Thanks, mate. Too good.